Hi, it's Friday, April 15th, 2016. I'd like to talk about today something that, years ago and still nowadays to some extent is still considered conspiracy theory. In my opinion, it's considered the truth, but it's a truth that's uncomfortable with the establishment and the corporate media, which is owned by the establishment, and the big banks and corporations. And it's the subject of precious metals manipulation, especially gold and silver as well, of course. And a lot of people, that don't know much about money and the nature of money and the history of the monetary system, when you tell them that, gold is manipulated or silver is manipulated, they don't understand. They think, oh, it's such a small market. Why would they care to manipulate the price of gold or silver? But they don't understand that, the central banks of the world, the major central banks, they still hold about 35,000 tons of official gold for their treasuries or for themselves. And why would they hold so much gold, 35,000 tons, if gold wasn't such an important monetary asset? And it's like a love-hate relationship kind of thing. They need to keep the public, ignorant about, the power of gold, how, it's such a barometer of, the monetary rectitude or, of central banks, such a barometer for, the central bank's fiat money, which, are so important to keeping this credit system going, and indebting people and keeping the establishment under, control. Establishment under, keeping the establishment in control, but people, we're not taught that in schools. I have a degree in international studies and economics, but I was never taught about, gold and the monetary system. The only way I learned about it was later in life, while self learning, reading books, going on the internet. So yeah, I think it was Jim Rickards who said they stopped teaching about gold in the monetary system back in the mid 70s when the U.S. went off the gold standard just after Bretton Woods, and then the IMF. I think it was around 1974. So if you went to university after 1974, there's nothing about gold. So it's understandable that people think, oh, if gold is such a unimportant barbaric relic, why would central banks need to manipulate it? But the reason they need to manipulate it is that, it's still very important, and a rising price of gold actually just means a debasement or a loss of confidence in the US dollar. And I bring up the US dollar just because it's the reserve currency of the world. And the main competitor for the dollar is gold. So with that introduction, I come up to this article that came out yesterday on Zero Hedge. And it says, Deutsche Bank admits it rigged gold prices, agrees to expose other manipulators. And they've also said the same thing about silver. But one thing I like to talk about the manipulation, because I worked as a futures and options broker for over 20 years, institutional clients. I worked for one of the big American banks. I've worked for a major European bank, for brokerage houses. And I traded mostly for my clients fixed income, bond futures and interest rates. But I also did some gold futures for clients and other products. And I also have been following gold, since 2002. And almost 24/7, you know, and I remember, when I started following more the gold market in '02, '03, '04, I always noticed like when the COMEX opened on the floor. Of course, nowadays there's no floor; it's all done electronically. But the main session open is 1:20 London time in the afternoon or 8:20 New York time. And prior to that, gold trades on COMEX, but on the access system, which is not as liquid. It's the pre-market, but it's still trading here in Europe. But I always noticed that, let's say gold was having a good day in London up until the 120 opening, or even a bit before 120, or around 8 o'clock New York time. And you'd notice that gold would, even today, not as much, but back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it would just drop. The COMEX came, the main session, and it would just be sold. Not every time, but 80, 75% of the time. And I know that there's a lot of talk of manipulating the fix, but the fix only happens a couple of times a day. But this was in every day, at the same time happening when the COMEX opened on the main session. And the other time that, gold would be sold would be, for example, when the main session on COMEX closed at 6:30 London time or 1:30 p.m. New York. Gold could be having a good day, being up $10, and then all of a sudden, the last few minutes leading up to 6:30 London time, gold would be sold off. And then, it would reopen on the access market and they would sell it even more. And the same thing for silver. And they would keep doing that on and on. There is a research that someone's done that if you took the price of gold while it traded on the main session COMEX from '02 to 2012, and if you took that price, gold would actually be down, even though it went from 300 to about 1900, but gold would be down if you only took the COMEX price. And it doesn't make sense in a free market, supposed free market, where things are more random. And so what I'm trying to say is that, they need to investigate also, the COMEX, and that's the job of the CFTC, Commodities Futures and Trading Commission in the US. But I don't hold much hope for that because they investigated JP Morgan and silver for 5 years, and they came out and said there's no problem. There's nothing there to see. But, maybe if these banks now, Deutsche Bank and other banks that are involved in this, and by that I mean the bullion banks, a lot of US banks, if they're exposed, they might expose the real culprits. In my opinion, they're the central banks and the treasuries of the major countries like Anglo-American sphere. They're the ones who, they need to keep the gold price under management, under control, because they want people to keep playing their fiat game. And the other thing that's interesting, and I found this now, and I wasn't able to find it earlier, but I remember reading years ago a copy of a letter from actually the Vatican, and it's from a department called Amministrazione del Patrimonio della Sede Apostolica, which means administration of the patrimony of the headquarters of the Vatican. Basically, is the Vatican Bank. And it's a letter from October 6th, 1975. And guess who it's addressed to? Mr. Paul A. Volcker, President, Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Well, Paul Volcker, before he became Fed chairman in 1979, I think, was president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the most important Fed bank, Fed branch. They always have a vote, in the FOMC, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It's the only bank that always has a vote. All the other 11 banks. They alternate their voting. And this is from Benedetto Argentieri from the Vatican Bank, and he says, "Dear Mr. Volcker," and I quote, "I wish to tell you how much I appreciated your kind reception and the conversation we had in New York 1 month ago." So, Vatican Bank going to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York to meet. Must be important for him to have to go to New York. "Your letter on September 23rd has now come at hand. I note that you confirmed the opinion you expressed on the gold held by your bank on behalf of the Amministrazione, or the Vatican. No, there is no objection to our selling it either on the official or the private market." And notice how he says selling the gold, but I actually think it's not just selling, it's also leasing it, because why would the Vatican not be concerned, if the Federal Reserve Bank, who's supposed to be, holding the Vatican's bank gold, why would the Vatican say, yeah, go ahead and sell it? What I think he meant is go ahead and lease it on our behalf, it's fine. And he ends the letter by saying, "You also tell me that you are studying the possibility of enlarging the existing relations between your bank and the Amministrazione." That's like euphemism for, enlarging our existing relations. That means you're looking to do a lot more leasing with our gold. And then he says, "I thank you very much for the attention you are giving to this matter." It just sounds really like, very convoluted, but if you read between the lines, he's giving Paul Volcker the go-ahead to, go and lease. Yeah, you can take our gold and lease it to manipulate the prices. "Hope to see you again in a not too distant future. I remain sincerely yours, Benedetto Argentieri." So that was in 1975 in October. And back in the 1st of January 1975, gold had become legal again to trade and own in the States. And that's when the COMEX opened. And I suspect that the Fed and the Treasury in the US, they wanted to make sure that now that gold was freely traded in the US, that they could control the prices. So they went to the Vatican and said, we're going to need to use your gold, lease it to keep the prices under control. And that's proof there in that letter. That's like 40 years ago, 41 years ago. They've been doing it for a long time, this manipulation. And, that's all I wanted to talk about. And I think, we need to focus not just on the fix where they, fix the price, for a few minutes in the morning in London in the afternoon, but we need to look at, who's giving the orders. Is it the Bank for International Settlements? Because the U.S. Federal Reserve say they never, lease their own gold, but are they doing it for someone else? Or is the Bank for International Settlements, are they doing it for the Fed? That needs to be found out. GATA, they've been at this game trying to expose the bullion banks, the Fed, and the Treasury since 1999. And they're considered kooks and conspiracy theorists. But now, the fact that Deutsche Bank has come out and says, yes, we manipulated precious metals and we're going to expose the other manipulators, I think things are starting to change. And people like me who've been at this, trying to expose it for over 10 years. I started noticing it in 03, 04 that there was manipulation, after every non-farm payroll number, even if the number was good for gold, gold would be bashed. If it was bad for gold, gold would be bashed. And then at the end of the day, they would bash it even more, and I used to speak to people, at the big banks. Sometimes I used to call them and they say, oh no, there's none of that going on. But I did have a client from a big American bank, and I can't say names, and he was at the treasury of this bank, and he told me once yes, Mario, gold is a political thing, and the price is controlled. And he said that to me, and he even told me that he was invited once to visit the gold vaults at the New York Federal Reserve Bank. So I can't tell you the name of the guy, but you know, it's out there. And so let's see what happens. Have a good day. Take care.